I think these women were especially courageous. They were dealing with the Attorney General, the top law enforcement. According to the article, they were threatened not to say anything, and they came forward anyway.
Governor Andrew Cuomo this morning calling the allegations against Eric Schneiderman especially shocking, given his very public role as champion of the Me Too movement and as advocate and ally for women's issues over his long career. In 2010, while still a state senator from Manhattan, Schneiderman introduced a bill to make intentional strangulation a violent felony. That same year, the National Organization for Women's New York branch endorsed him in his successful bid for Attorney General, citing his, quote, unmatched work in protecting women who are victims of domestic abuse. Today, the organization is calling for their one-time ally to, quote, be held accountable to the highest standard of the law. And joining me now is the president of the National Organization for Women's New York chapter, Sonia Osorio. Sonia, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, Sonia, first of all, your first reaction when you heard the shocking allegations?
Utter shock. You know, you had to take a look at it twice to let it sink in for a moment.
Did you know Mr. Schneiderman?
Certainly. I mean, we have worked with him over 15 years. So it was quite shocking to hear these allegations that were very credible and corroborated and egregious.
Yeah, it's not only harassment and sexual attacks, but physical attacks. I mean, of the kind, and added to that, there was racism involved in some of the comments that he made to some of these women. But my question is, you know, as I said in the introduction, he was a very progressive politician, which is why you guys have endorsed him over the years. And I wonder, someone said this morning, and it seemed to me to strike a tone, which is, why do progressive politicians have a sense of security that some of them can do things like Mr. Schneiderman did? And one person suggested that it was perhaps the lingering consequences of the Monica Lewinsky scandal and Bill Clinton, when it appeared that women's organizations said, all is forgiven as long as your politics are correct. Do you think there's anything to that?
That's been a long time. And while, yes, there have been many progressives who have really been guilty of really bad behavior, in this case, unlawful behavior, it's not just in that domain. I mean, we have seen over the last year that it is, it meets no class issue, race issue, industry. I mean, there are men in the media, there are men in Hollywood, there have politicians from the beginning of time. I think it's more an issue of they begin to think that they're above the law.
Yeah, and of course, it's not just progressives. I mean, conservatives have been charged and proved to have been abusers as well. Now, was there ever any hint that this person had that kind of response? You know, and we're only alleging because it still hasn't been proven, although, as you say, the witnesses, the victims are very credible. Was there any hint before this?
Not to me, and I don't believe to many people, but there's always a circle of people who know. When you have somebody who is a serial abuser, there are going to be people in his circle who have witnessed it or seen it. And I think that's the next phase in this Me Too movement is thinking about those of us who are complicit in allowing this type of behavior to fester. Right,
enablers, even if only by their silence. But you know, the reason I ask, I'm sure you've seen this in the news today, because back in 2013, Donald Trump tweeted, "Weiner is gone, Spitzer is gone. Next will be lightweight AG Eric Schneiderman. Is he a crook? Wait and see. Worse than Spitzer and Weiner." Is that just a coincidence, or was he onto something way back 5 years ago?
I think it's a coincidence. I think that he was targeting any elected official, anybody else with power who was accusing him of some kind of crime or looking into his business dealings.
Yeah, the betrayal of women. What does now do? We were talking in the green room. How in the world, I mean, unless that small circle that you just mentioned, begins to speak up, and it's usually a very small circle, you're right. Unless they begin to speak up, what does an organization like NOW do to better vet these politicians whose politics seem to be fine?
Mm-hmm. I wonder if we'll start hearing about these stories sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
These 4 women did not have to come forward.
Right.
And they did it under very circumstances that were dangerous because he had threatened them in the past. But they came forward and they have said that they didn't want this to happen to anybody else. And also, once one of them found out that there were others, that really emboldened her. And I would not be surprised if we start hearing stories, getting those testimonies from women who have the stories to tell about people who are running for office before they actually get into office.
Right. So, you tweeted this morning, as it stands right now, the Manhattan District Attorney, Cy Vance, is going to be the one investigating Mr. Schneiderman. You don't think that's a good idea. Tell us why.
Mr. Vance is under investigation by the AG's office here in New York for the mishandling of the Harvey Weinstein case involving Ambra Badalana in 2015.
Right.
So that's an inherent conflict of interest. He can't then turn around and be investigating the AG's office or Eric Schneiderman. I think the most transparent thing would be to have somebody else investigate, a special prosecutor or another office.
Is NOW going to get involved in trying to make the selection for Mr. Schneiderman's immediate replacement?
Absolutely. We are already thinking about who would be a good replacement. Certainly, it'd be nice to have a woman in the position. That'd be a nice change of pace. So there are a lot of capable and ready women who could do it. So we look forward to supporting someone who would be really great for the job.
All right. Well, Sonia, thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's a last-minute call, but I really appreciate it.
Gracias.
De nada.